Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Joel Malkoff, who's the Ethics Giver. Joel, welcome to the program.
Mike, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You are welcome. And before we get into what the heck an ethics giver is, I want to know what's your background, what led you into the industry to focus on ethics, because I know that this is such a hot industry and need to make these changes at a foundational level. But give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, that'd be great. Currently I'm, and for the last almost 20 years, I'm running a medical device company. I'm general manager, vice president, and we distribute medical and scientific products in the university pharmaceutical world. That's where I am right now. How I started my business when I graduated with a business degree from Pace University in New York. It was tough times. It was the oil crunch in 1973, so I couldn't really start with a corporate company that I wanted to. I wound up getting into the car industry. So I kind of went from Ivy League, Ivy Tower, ethical type of thinking in a university right into the world of cars. So, I kind of learned selling through manipulation, fear, bait and switch, a lot of the unethical tactics. And then as I moved on, I kind of grew into larger corporations where I also saw unethical behavior, but until an epiphany, if you will, I started going on a path of ethics. So that's pretty much what my book is about. It's, you might call it a narrative nonfiction or a business fiction, but it's written as a parable, and it's pretty much my life story, going from unethical behavior to a goal now every day really is just to keep improving the ethics. Little sum of my background, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's so neat, and I love those parable-type books like The Go-Giver, like Who Moved My Cheese, and all of those type of ones, because there's some wonderful business lessons in there, and when you can get engrossed in a story, and as you know in business and marketing, story selling is so powerful rather than just telling facts. So was that one of the reasons you decided to teach your principles of ethics in a story format?
Yes, it is, exactly. I feel the same as you. The stories are so important to make somebody resonate with what you're trying to teach. I think the difficulty with business fable is balancing a good story with the business principles. So it's a difficult process. You don't want a person to get lost in the story and the business principles are too buried in. But most of the time, the business fable is a little on the light side, so you may need a little more of the sidebars and captions and summaries at the end to put it together. My business parable doesn't have any of that in terms of prompting and captions. You just read the story, and hopefully you just get it. So from my point of view, when I first got into sales, I read The Greatest Salesman in the World, Og Badillo. It's an older book, but it was a business parable, and it did a lot to teach me the things that I needed to learn. I wound up absorbing it over a period of time, which took a little later than I actually read it. But I think from a point of view of finding that niche, for me, it's ethical selling. So I focus on buyer-seller relationships. It's not really about general business ethics like inside trading or embezzlement and such. It's really to teach a seller to sell with ethics. So the buyer has a long-term relationship with the seller. So it really is that goal. And there's many purposes of it, from what you should do because it's right. But the key is really, from a business point of view, what's in it for the business person that buys my book or listens to what I'm saying. It generates more profit with a long-term relationship versus a short.
Yeah, it made me think of something in classes that I teach at the university level in marketing. Many times there's discussions around legality versus ethics. And there's a difference, right? Something could be legal to do, but is it really ethical? Is it really in the best interest of the customer? Then it falls into ethics. So where do you feel like personal ethics and business ethics, not the legal aspect, but personal versus business, where does that line get drawn, and should there be a line?
There shouldn't be a line. Your personal ethics and your business ethics should align. Unfortunately, people might have stronger personal ethics, and yet they feel in the business world they don't need to apply it to that degree. So, with logic like, well, it's okay if I cheat a big company, they can afford it. Your personal ethics and your business ethics need to be the same. And your personal ethics, usually from a spiritual religious point of view, is a foundation. And that folds right into the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. Yeah. So from a legal point of view, as you mentioned, the letter of the law you need to abide to, but from a higher level, going beyond the letter of the law, the spirit of the law, what is really the intent, then you need to infuse into your own method of selling and in business to apply the golden rule, where you're really saying you don't want to do unto others what shouldn't be done unto you, from a negative point of view, or a positive point of view, the opposite, do unto others as you want others do unto you. But I think a negative point of view actually allows you to think a little better of it, because it's difficult for someone to say, well, you should love your neighbor as you love yourself. Self-love is a very strong thing. It's hard to have self-love, for somebody beyond yourself. But the spirit of the law, it really needs to be the key, and it really is the golden rule.
Yeah, as you were mentioning that, it made me think of something I want to get your opinion on. If we could bring up a specific example of business ethics in the selling environment, and we used an example or a case study, I think that probably many people would go, oh, that's easy. That makes sense. Well, I think that many times a salesperson might go, you know what? It makes me think of this. What's easy to do is easy not to do. So you might know it intuitively, but then getting it into practice is another thing. And then secondly, along that same line, is when you are able to polish that up in your own sales and your own business, it distances you so much from the competition, because the competition is not disciplined to be doing that. So now when you're talking to a prospect and they've already talked to 2 or 3 other of your competitors, maybe you stand out because you're just like genuine and authentic and transparent. What do you think of that approach?
I think it's perfect, and I think from your own direction as authority positioning coach, what you're doing is you're telling a salesperson to do something unique in a marketplace that is relatively unethical in a general sense of the word, because there's kind of that failure to be fair and good, where you're just looking to barely meet the letter of the law. So, a couple of examples from a marketing example would be advertorials. So it's legal, to do an advertorial, but if you're trying to have a reader of a magazine or a website think that this ad has no commercial value because you made it seem like an opinion article or used the same type set as the article, then it's unethical, but it's legal. So that's from an advertising, point of view. You can see that pretty clearly. Or even from a sales point of view, a real estate salesman showing a house. You want to put your best foot forward, but there's a need to do full disclosure. So If you're showing a prospective buyer a home and they can't see something like defective wiring or plumbing, it's an obligation of the salesperson to provide full disclosure. But let's say you see there's some peeling of paint in the house. But the salesperson's goal is still to sell, and to sell professionally and to provide the best light. So you're not really obligated on an ethical level to say, oh, look, this room needs paint. See the flaking? Because some things are very obvious that a buyer should be able to see. But ethically, you really need to disclose everything. So there's a balance between providing full disclosure, what is full disclosure, and when do you provide full disclosure, because you really don't want to paint a bad picture when you're presenting a product, to a prospective buyer.
I think that's I spent about 10 plus years in the mortgage banking industry, so I worked in the real estate industry with realtors, and I remember this example from a marketing psychology standpoint, and I think it really ties in exactly with what you just mentioned with full disclosure, right? So if you were walking into this house with the realtor showing you around, and the realtor is pointing out all these wonderful things, and your eye automatically goes to a spot in the room where you notice a crack or a something, right? Something negative. If that realtor is just glossing over that and not mentioning it and going to the next room, all of a sudden you're focused on that. But on the other hand, if you walk in and you say, look at this spacious room and it's just wonderful, look at the sun coming in. Now you'll notice right here where there's this crack, we've already had a contractor come out. We see exactly what the problem is. It's not structural. It's not load bearing. We can have that fixed up and it's not a problem at all. Now, as we move on to the next room, you see the difference there where you're pointing it out and then your mind goes to, oh, okay, good. They already took care of that. As opposed to if you notice they're trying to gloss over it, now you're thinking it's bigger than it really is, and that comes down to ethics, right? The ethics of pointing out a potential flaw.
Excellent. That's it's a perfect sales technique. It's turning a negative into a positive. The prospective buyer is usually they're not expecting that forthrightness, that integrity in selling. So it turns into a big positive, and it definitely differentiates you, especially if you're looking at a crack as opposed to paint flaking, where the cracking could be indicative of a structural problem. That really sends a red flag to a buyer.
Yeah, exactly. So when you start working with someone, whether it's an individual or a team or an organization, where do you find is the first place that you're beginning? Because obviously it's a big nut to crack, so you got to start somewhere.
It's a little interesting, that question, because I am running a medical device company now, so I don't do any speaking engagements or coaching or consulting. So I really don't walk into a situation and appraise it and determine what's the best way to go. But from my own point of view, internally managing a company, it pretty much starts with Sales 101. So it's the basic things, what is the buyer's intent? And develop that kind of empathy and make a salesperson understand that they need to be thinking what's in it for them, not what's in it for me. So, kind of getting the salesperson out of the I mode and getting them into the we mode. And once they start thinking about what is the buyer's intent, how do I satisfy that, then they're starting to think about what I can do to make the sale, what I can do really to satisfy the buyer's intent. What really do they want to do? From that step forward, then you can start talking about the right ways and techniques of doing it. Don't slander a competitor. Point out your assets of your product as opposed to pointing out the negatives in the competitor. When you point out your positives, you'll be relating something that the competitor may not have. So the techniques, after you can get your salespeople to understand that they need to think from a buyer's point of view, what kind of needs could they satisfy with your product or your service, And then you move further into, okay, that's the strategy. What's the tactics? Be ethical. Don't slander competitors. Give full disclosure. You just go down all the steps of what it takes to be ethical, and the differentiation between legality, what you barely need to do, and providing goodness and fairness when you're dealing with a buyer-seller relationship, and that will give you long-term growth, and that's where the profitability fits in, because long-term relationships are less expensive to maintain. You get referrals, you get references, you just build on growing your own area, your own territory.
Yeah, what you described there made me remember a couple decades ago being at a event where Tracy, the speaker, was presenting, and he said this.
Yes.
You always remember something and attribute it back to the person you heard it from, kind of like in printing. But he says, okay, what's everyone's favorite radio station? And people are like, oh, it's this and that. And they're like, nope. And he goes, no, it's WIIFM. What's in it for me? And if we can use the right ethical approach and know that our prospective buyers or the person we're dealing with is always tuned into what's in it for me. It's not what's in it for the company or the salesperson. It's what's in it for that person. And then when you're presenting and talking, now there might be a little bit more congruent communication going on.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I could see the people that you have interviewed in the past, everything from Brian to Tom Hopkins or Bob Burke or Lisa McLeod or Amy Russell. I mean, all those people are so involved in just understanding giving, noble cause, proper way to influence. But it's all about really empathizing with the person you're trying to build a relationship with. And many times you should walk away from a sale if your product or service doesn't fit. The prospective buyer, it blows them away. I mean, they're just not used to anything like that. And if you even recommend a competitor, it's even that much better. And you can be sure the next time that person needs something, you're first on their list.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's really a really good perspective. And it's hard. You can't just make a 180-degree turn and go, poof, I'm changing everything in my approach. But if you keep it top of mind and work at it, it'll become natural. So I would just like to thank you for coming on today and ask if anyone's interested in learning more about ethics and picking up a copy of your book, what is the best way that they can reach out to you?
The easiest way is through Amazon. I have a hardcover, a softcover, an ebook, and I just finished an audio book. A great actor did the narrating of it. So Amazon is the best place to buy the book. Great rates, and my own website, The Ethics Giver, is a great way to get a background of the articles that I wrote and my ethical philosophy, if you will. But the focus is on sales and marketing, so that is my niche, if you will. And Mike, thank you again. Enjoyed the time with you.
You're welcome, Joel. Thank you for coming on, and I will make sure to have the links to your website in the show notes. Thank you so much, Joel.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.